everyone, and welcome. It's nice to see everyone over here. So, whether you're joining here for the first time or you've been here for a very long time, it's so great that you guys are here. So, uh, I'm excited to introduce you to today's host, Matthew Meadows. As I'm going to move the floor to him. So, yeah.
No, thanks, Neha. Hi everyone. As I mentioned, I'll sort of try to keep it tight, Scott. But yeah, I mean, wow, that's like a huge bio. That's way overkill. But thank you for that, Neha. Yeah, basically, I guess in short, in the least like car salesman-y way possible. I've been a part of like HR Rebels for some time. I happen to have a company related to performance management and performance reviews, but I figured that, wanting to participate with the community, I would try to put together something helpful. So, based on all the experience we have with performance reviews and helping other companies manage their performance review process, I figured I'd put together a conversation around how to make performance reviews not like the most painful thing in the world that we have to deal with. And we also happen to have a little bit of like AI specialty in what we do, so I figured I'd sort of sprinkle that in. So the general concept of the talk today is basically like, can we find actionable ways to give you guys some tools to make performance reviews a little bit easier in whatever teams you happen to be a part of or happen to be working with. And can you lean on some of these new tools to help you out? So that's the general topic. I'll share and we can kind of kick things off. Before I do that, like the lowest possible pressure icebreakery sort of way, I'd love to just kind of get a sense of what do you guys do for performance reviews, annual, biannual? How do we feel about it? If you want to just throw an emoji, you don't even have to say it out loud. If you just want to like add it to the chat, I'd love to just get a sense of like what sort of processes we're dealing with this group today. Only if you're comfortable sharing, you don't have to. I'm going to speak to annual reviews, biannual reviews, improving upon those. But if anyone has any sense of, what they do or would like to share, I'm open to checking it out so I know I'm speaking to the right audience. Emily, thank you. Annual reviews, check-ins, awesome. Bamboo, love it. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. That's great to hear. Um, I'll see others as they might populate. But anyway, we can just kind of kick things off. So yeah, I'm gonna keep this very sort of casual, as you guys can probably tell. I'd rather not bore the crap out of you as we go through. This is kind of where I typically like to start conversations, generally from the standpoint of, people typically hate performance reviews, for lack of a better term. The teams who are doing them really don't want to take part in them. I'd say collectively as sort of HR, love the concept of how do we help team members learn and grow and improve and develop, and then the organization can benefit as a result of that. But those two things don't go together. The fact that we want it to be this positive experience, but at the same time, teams sort of dread review season. So the good news is it doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be, the most painful thing. So, I'm here to try to show you some not only the reasons for why they suck so badly, but how we can sort of work to fix them and make them a little bit more effective and better for your team. So there are a few different culprits as to why they're generally difficult and painful. This is an oft-cited statistic, basically just the amount of time it takes. So typically people say you're spending hundreds of hours managing your team as a manager over the course of the year, and that's a ton of time. I could just, speak to some of my own personal experience quickly, a little story, I guess, to get us into things. I was previously in an organization where I was managing a team of like 14, 15, and we would do uh 360 reviews every 6 months biannually. And we effectively had to sort of stop what we were doing for a 2 week period to enable these to happen. And what would ultimately take place is people just wouldn't do them until the very last second. They would try to scrounge some stuff together, a lot of generic sort of crap would go into it, and then I'm sort of left with this sort of bucket of nothing useful to talk about from the peers, my own sort of somewhat subjective input as the manager. and then really not having effective conversation. So we would lose a lot of productive time and end up having these reviews that were just completely ineffective. So it's not because people are bad at giving feedback necessarily. It's that the system that we've set up for this just isn't meant to support an effective practice. So, the grander question is, where does evidence of the work we do live? It's in the tools we use. It's in Slack. It's in Teams conversations. It's in whatever project management software you use. It's in Jira if you have a more of a developmental tech team. And so what we're constantly asking people to do is go reference these things to try to come up with evidence to support the evaluations you're putting together. And so it's no wonder why recency bias is such an issue, because you're never going to be able to dig through all of these to get at really coherent points for the past 6 months, as in Emily's case, or 12 months for other teams that might do annual conversations. So um, another sort of element that ties into that is we all generally agree, this is not a controversial statement, that feedback is best served when it is timely, when it occurs close to the event or the behavior that generated that feedback taking place. But if that's the case, if we all agree around that, why then do we rely on systems which take up the maximum possible gap between the event occurring and actual meaningful conversations taking place if a manager didn't happen to step in and say something? So ultimately, what we feel is that the typical review process does a lot more harm than good. It becomes more of a documentation exercise than actually how do we help team members improve. And here's like three quick points to sort of support the argument. Recency bias, as mentioned, promotions, merit increases, things like that happening as a result of what have you done for me lately? Because I can't remember, beyond that period of time. So that's not really fair. Um, Everything being boiled down into one or two conversations over the course of the year, also not a really accurate or fair portrayal of what that person's done, and introducing a lot of subjectivity. There's no way that can carry the weight of everything that's actually taken place. And then the last one, which I think is the worst offender, is the concept of surprises, which I've actually had in my own review process. Like coming into a conversation, uh, hearing something for the very first time at a point where I have no ability to act upon that information is horrendous. And this is the Super Bowl for a lot of our employees, if you happen to be sports fans. This is the biggest time of the year for team members to not only reflect on what they've done, but a lot of times defend the actions that you've taken or the accomplishments you've had, which is not a really great way of thinking about it. So this should never be the point in which new information is shared. So as I sort of mentioned, touched on, and sort of to close the loop on why reviews aren't so fantastic in the more traditional sense, they've become a checking the box way of documenting this is what's happened in the past, very retrospective. We like to think that they help us to set, move forward goals, but very rarely does follow up happen tied to these conversations. So we want it to be not documentation, but instead this forward looking, feedback forward sort of conversation that helps us to improve. So if we can sort of silo this into three things so that we can tackle them together now. So let's define the problems in three buckets so that we can work on solutions. So one would be, as listed here, memory, just the concept of how can we remember and reflect on everything that's taken place? Not an easy thing to do, to help us overcome recency bias. Another would be the structuring of the review and the information going into it. So how do we ask more useful questions to get us to more useful feedback and information rather than just fluffy generic stuff? And then the last one would be the frequency in which we're talking about performance rather than relying on once or twice a year. Let's make it perhaps a more common, frequent conversation taking place so that we can overcome surprises and perhaps work to compound on growth more quickly over the course of the year. So they're not necessarily three separate problems. They're three sort of branches of the main underlying issue, which is that the review is sort of treated as one big event that happens every so often as opposed to a continuous story taking place. So let's dive into now sort of the purpose of this presentation, which is how do we approach these? How do we fix these in our own review context? So the first one, dealing with memory, is we have here stop writing reviews from scratch. Basically, if you if you land on review form and you're not sure what to talk about, then you've already missed something earlier on in the process. This is a fantastic visual that I use all the time when explaining who we are. But basically, this is such a great way of showing you're having once or twice year review conversations. Everything earlier than September is just gone. You can't remember it. Unfortunately, the team is still performing, right? They're still doing things, they're still accomplishing tasks and goals, but we don't have a way of necessarily capturing that to bring forward into that conversation, especially if we're being asked to like log into a tool to share feedback. That's too much of like a context switch. I'm never going to think of doing that over the course of my day. So it becomes very difficult, the tools we have in place becomes very difficult for us to be able to capture this information. So it's not necessarily about working harder to get more feedback. It's about just working in a smarter way to get at that information. So here's a really great way of just sort of pulling us through into the AI sort of side of things. The best possible review you could have is not, oh, let me just like uh, talk about all the stuff that I think you did well. As you can see here, generic stuff. Instead, it's just a summary of everything we've already been talking about. So ideally, we want you and your managers, your team members going into an evaluation with a corpus of feedback and data, being able to sit down with the questions and then pick bits and pieces and apply them as answers to those questions. So it takes you much less time to conduct the review, but also you have real examples and information to work off of. So how can some of these new AI elements, AI tools that we're working with get us there? I have a sort of, for each of these, I have a sort of very easy start doing this tomorrow solution, and then a sort of longer term approach if you guys are interested in taking that. So the start now zero cost approach is basically pulling out all of the data, all the information from the various tools you're using, and using a prompt such as this one to help formulate some overarching themes or insights. The goal here is not, which people get very turned off by very quickly. The goal is not let's get AI to write feedback for us. The goal is how can we support managers in providing their real input. And so your team tomorrow, based on whatever they're using, could export information, dump it into these systems, prompt it to provide some input. I love this little element here, which is, flagging areas where evidence is thin. The last thing we want is, as you guys know, these tools to sort of, be sycophants or like hallucinate their way into providing you with information that's just not there. So if you can tell it to call out where it doesn't have enough information, that's also a helpful thing. So at the very least, you guys already have stuff being generated. Pull out that information, ask these tools to help summarize it for you, and you've got some really great stuff to talk about next time you go into a review. The deeper, sort of more in-depth version of this is that there's a bunch of tools out there, the Bamboo HRs, the ADPs, even, the Lattice, the 15.5s, us, the work stories that basically are designed to do this sort of on your behalf if you can set that up in the way that you need it to, providing you with opportunities to solicit input and then summarizing it on your behalf. So if you would like to invest in that sort of activity to make a more continuous process possible, a bunch of these tools out there do it or do it now as a result of the way that sort of the market's been pushing for reviews to move. Um, Second item to tackle, we call it structure, but it's basically just how are we asking better questions to get better answers from our team. Um, this is probably the easiest step you can take. A really good example here is this, rate overall performance or rate Matt on his communication 1 to 5, and then provide some, reasoning for that, which I've seen on like countless team forums that we've worked with over the years. That's just going to get you generic slop that can be applied to anyone at any point of the year. Really, what you want to be asking is much more specific information related to exactly what that person's doing. As you can see, three clearer examples, um, but go deeper. And this is not a difficult thing for the managers to be answering. You're not making it more difficult for them. You're actually making the process easier for them because they're answering very specific things as opposed to just a nebulous overarching idea. This is just a quick example from something internal that I have, but basically when we're setting new teams up, we work with them around these competencies and we try to dial into, as you can see, asking various versions of questions to pull out related to these different overarching categories. And I want to sort of we'll extrapolate on that a little bit further as we go through the AI elements here. But how can you use ChatGPT, Claude, et cetera, to help you on this front? Very simple, very easy. Give it who you are as a company, what your ideals are in terms of your core values. Give it your current questions. Give it, if I didn't say, job descriptions already. And then ask for behavior specific questions to be asked. Really, what you want to get to is for you as HR or for a manager, when we're conducting a performance review, what exact information do I want to have my hands on to know whether that person is hitting the marks or not hitting the marks for their specific position? Anything beyond that is fluff. It's going to fatigue your team in terms of answering questions, and it's just not useful. Also, you could apply that to pulse surveys, engagement surveys, but that's like another conversation to be had. But basically, back into the questions you should be asking and use these tools to help you. You shouldn't say, "Oh, I guess this is a good question to be asked." Again, the deeper version of this is if you don't have already, building out complete progression frameworks for your organization, which is helpful not just from a review perspective, but also from like a progression perspective for individual employees of, when can I move up? How can I move up? What are the expectations for moving up? It's nice to define those. Use these tools to craft those. Here's a great example. This is from a company we work with who I know wouldn't mind me sharing. This is what you can craft very easily using these tools. You can say, these are the areas that we deem to be important for this specific role. As you can see, they have increasing levels and expectations related to the different competencies, very specific responsibilities that adapt and change over time based on those levels. You can build this and then you can turn all of these into questions to be asked of the review. If you're reviewing an account manager level 3, you should have questions related to these specific things. It's a very easy activity. I know I keep harping on it, but it takes a little bit of time, but it's going to pay dividends in terms of making your reviews much more effective pieces of information to capture. Okay, and the third and sort of final element we want to tackle in terms of how do we help us improve our reviews, frequency. So I like this. The conversation should be a reflection of previously, spoken information, not a verdict of how well or not well that person's doing. You shouldn't have employees coming to the review like with their fingers crossed, like hoping to get a good review. They should walk into that conversation already knowing how it's going to go. As I sort of stated earlier, surprises are an indication that a process is broken. Love this statistic. Basically, a more continuous feedback process means you're going to get 3x plus motivation out of your team. That to me was really shocking. I was thinking of like, imagine if you could 3x any other part of your organization, how much of an impact that would have. And just making this sort of a shift has such a dramatic impact on the way your employees function on a day-to-day basis. That's pretty telling. This is, I think, is a fantastic just sort of visual to support the argument we're making, which is don't just have a conversation once or twice a year. Yeah, you're sharing ad hoc stuff, right? You're having conversations around, oh yeah, great job, or hey, nice job with that project, but none of it's captured. So if you can find ways and systems of getting at that all throughout the year, as you can see here, you have hundreds of data points, hundreds of pieces of information to reflect on come your next conversation. And hopefully you're sharing those in between your review taking place, which is nice, as Emily mentioned, having other check-ins. From an AI perspective, I think this is super, super powerful, very easy to set up. The zero cost approach here is basically in all these different tools, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, etc., you can set up scheduled tasks that prompt you based on whatever the timeline is for you. You could have a, 9 a.m. on weekdays or whatever it might be to prompt you to provide feedback on a group or a specific person. In response to that, you add your thoughts and then to ask it to save to a document. You set it up once, it runs forever. You are automatically, it's sort of like compound investing, and reinvesting your dividends. You don't have to think about it. It's just happening. And then at the end of the year, oh, wow, look at all this amazing stuff that I have and how much more money I made. But that's really what we want to get to is just continuously providing information in a very easy way. It's not about, I know I keep saying more feedback, and you might be rolling your eyes saying, well, how am I expecting managers to, be spending more time on it? It's not about getting more feedback necessarily. It's about making the act of giving feedback easy, part of the workflow, happening in the tools you guys are already using. So I love this little prompt. I have it set up myself. It's a great way to collect information for the team. And then again, the deeper version of this is in those tools that I mentioned previously. A lot of them do this. A lot of them will send you notifications, reminders, etc., to provide input. Things to take into account are, what tools do you use as a team? Can it integrate within those tools so you don't have to do that context switching I was talking about earlier? What type of reviews do you inevitably want to conduct? 360, traditional, etc. What's the hierarchy of our team? Can we get feedback from more than just the manager? These are all little things to take into account as you're exploring, but worth doing so. Because if you can, the argument I always make, again, to be a little bit salesy, but not to reference ourselves, but if you can save the team, X hours of management time, then the ROI is there instantaneously when you're investigating tools like this, if you believe in a more continuous sort of practice. So, um, extrapolating this into like where we're at with our specific company, like, hey, Matt, how can I apply this to my own specific team? And again, thank you, Emily, for sharing your little experience. So, we've sort of separated this into three different buckets, just early, mid, advanced. Early stage companies, a lot of who we speak to are, hey, I'm a single HR person. I got a small-ish, relatively small team, although 40 is nothing to, shake a stick at. We kind of do reviews. We kind of don't. We did before, now we don't, or we do when someone asks for that sort of thing. Some very easy things you can do to apply to improve the process. Incorporate some of these little check-ins taking place, making sure they're documented. Um, eh, One main thing I like to touch on is not overbuilding. Teams will very quickly go from no process to, yeah, we're going to use a Survey Monkey or a Google form or just a spreadsheet. And then from there, they very quickly jump to, oh, now that we have all this, let's do some calibration across the team. If you find you're having that sort of thought process and conversation, then it's time to invest in a platform because the time you're spending as an HR person trying to build those things out is better spent actually managing and working with the team. There are tools that do all these things already. Mid stage for teams that are doing annual, biannual reviews, participation's okay. I always have to follow up with the team to get them done. They could be better. I have some managers who do really well at reviewing and some managers who don't. This is a large portion of the population. Some quick tips on that would be, again, auditing, improving the questions. You'll instantly get better answers regardless of how well the manager gives feedback. Add additional touch points. I know I keep harping on Emily, but thank you for Emily providing having additional check-ins in between reviews taking place, but making sure they're documented. It's not necessarily helpful if you're just having a conversation and then it's just sort of like going into the ether. Have that conversation, but have that information be documented so that you can bring it into that next review cycle. And then, as we touched on in sort of the first fix, using AI to pull in information from other tools and summarize it, and then use that information in your reviews. And then the last sort of team is mature. We've got a very healthy review process taking place, but we wish we could sort of get that extra 20%, 10% out of our team to really take us to the next level. We'd love some more analytics to come out of this. So our recommendation there is, again, getting your frameworks in order, getting feedback from other team members. A lot of teams will just default to manager to team member because it's perceived as quick and easy. But really, that helps to reduce subjectivity, reduce recency bias. You're getting the most holistic view of an employee. So getting feedback from other people, and then building out various dashboards using all this information to tell you not only how well that individual is doing, but how well groups, departments are doing against each other, and then using that to inform future processes. So again, you can do a lot of this manually. with AI tools, as sort of we mentioned. And then there are a lot of platforms that exist if you're not using them already that can help you tackle a lot of these things. So bring us sort of full circle. The ideal sort of setup is tools to help you capture the work that's taking place right now. Hopefully within the scope of the tools that you're already using, rather than asking someone to go somewhere else, which they're just not ever going to do. Using that information, structuring inputs appropriately so that you're getting really good input on, oh yeah, Matt really crushed that project because XYZ, those sorts of things. And then finally, synthesizing the information, having systems automatically summarize, aggregate, pull out insights, write the performance reviews if you really want to go crazy. But being able to turn this all into actionable information. There's no point or use in doing any of this if the information you get out is not actionable for the individual or for the organization. And then on the right hand here, I love this little sort of snippet that we put together around not necessarily improving the review, but making it so that performance is just captured and this is just part of the work you guys are doing. It shouldn't be seen as this giant separate sort of engagement we have to take part in. It's just another part of what we do. And this was the most telling to me, this awesome stat from BetterWorks about retaining talent. Teams that engage in a more continuous practice, 44% better retention. That in and of itself is just crazy. Again, if you're trying to make an argument, I had a conversation earlier today with a team, and the HR manager was like, "Yeah, this is great. And, going to have to loop in executives, get the budgets, et cetera." If you can say that you're retaining talent at such a higher level and growing your current team, that just ROI positive instantaneously as well. So that's a fantastic sort of thing to lean on when it comes to decision making around should we or should we not take steps to improve the process. So this is the best sort of visual ideal as we come to a close here. What we really want to get to is a healthy practice wherein you have feedback continuously coming in and being documented and shared, having sort of lower, I guess like lower barrier performance review related conversations over the course of the year, just to sort of plant a flagpole every now and again and sort of come together with the team member. And then as a result of that, you get this nice continuous improvement of performance from the team member, as opposed to just 6 months from now, we'll have a conversation, then they'll maybe improve. And then 6 months from then, maybe they'll improve again. We want this compounding effect taking place. And if you can do it effectively using various tools and systems, you're going to get happy employees because they have better feedback coming in. You're going to have happier managers because they're spending way less time on performance reviews. And then hopefully you guys, from the HR perspective, are happier because you have much less overhead when it comes to managing of review processes and following up with people to get them done. So, um, takeaways for you guys, aside from sort of the AI elements, the AI prompting and stuff like that, that we're happy to share. If you can do, three things to tomorrow to help improve your process, one would be don't have your team only rely on memory or whatever they can think about come review time. Try to get them doing something ahead of time or continuously collecting information so that come review time, they just have to pull up that doc, they pull up that spreadsheet, or they pull up that tool, and you got a bunch of really good stuff to reference. Second, fix the questions. Fixing the questions, making them more specific, instantly improves the process and gets you better information. And then the last part, having more frequent conversations means that each review you have takes less time, less surprises, and your employees and managers are continuously on the same page with regard to what they can do to improve over time. So not sort of kicking off a question to be answered, but just sort of an audience reflection for you guys would be reflecting on your own processes. What's one thing that if you fixed tomorrow would make the biggest impact on improving your reviews, and can you actually sort of take that next step? For me, it would be, thanks, Emily. For me, it would be, as I keep harping on, high leverage change would be just changing the questions and the feedback prompts. It costs you nothing. It takes you an hour or two to put together, but it will just immediately improve the very next review you guys do. So I'll stop there. There's a lot of talking. If anyone has any questions or wants to hop in or wants to chat or brainstorm, happy to do so. But hopefully some of that is helpful and might be helpful to you guys and your teams moving forward. I'd say
Excellent.
Neha as well. I don't know if you want to hop in with anything related to the credits after the fact.
Mm, well, no questions from me, but if anybody has any questions, please let us know. Hang on.
John, looks like John has a question. What's up, John? I appreciate the hand raise.
Yeah, yeah.
It took me a while to find it.
Yeah,
So, um, first of all, thank you.
sure.
That's very succinct, it's very powerful. I think it's another example of how AI can um, make complicated processes easier, right? But kind of the overarching issue I just wanted to raise is that every company has this issue. Every company. I mean, if they don't have the issue, then they aren't doing reviews.
Right.
And there are plenty of those. Uh,
Hmm.
um, and it comes down to a disconnect between what the company management wants to do and what HR wants to do. When you can get those married and working together, it promotes a better culture. And that's my freak point. Okay, that's what I do. That's what I like. And the biggest takeaway isn't how you're treating your people. That's big. It's huge. It makes a company strong. It makes it far more efficient and far more profitable and far more exceeding far more the goals that a company sets out. But from an HR perspective, if HR can't give return on ROI analyses, data, whether it be retention in time or dollars or whatever, then it fails because then management will not look at HR as a partner. And of all the things that I take away from this, it's another tool to help the changing perspective and job that HR is currently changing to and from. And that is more technology oriented, but with the people perspective. So thank you. That's my view from, I guess I would say an upper management point of view, but also a diehard old HR guy. There.
No, I love that. I appreciate it, John. And I'm not meaning to sort of like bump it back at you. I completely agree with what you're saying. I think from my perspective, yeah, executive and leadership, if they're focused on driving the business forward, great. The point of a business is to make money. Absolutely. You're not going to do that if you don't have people that can execute on the vision and mission of the team.
Absolutely true.
And if you're riding your people in a way that makes them demotivated, you're going to lose them, and that's going to cost you money. So if you can rely on HR as a partner, not only as the voice of the people, but HR to come and implement tools to make sure your people are happy and growing and improving, that's hitting the bottom line. It may not be direct immediately. It may take some time for you to determine, yeah, are we retaining more? Are people more engaged? But it absolutely has an impact on the business because people are your business, as it's cliche, but without the people, you're not going to be able to do anything. So I completely agree with everything you said.
It also integrates with how you attract and hire people.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, there are similar issues here. And I know that it's talked about endlessly right now. Lack of jobs. Well, there are jobs. Are there fewer? Yes. Maybe. But if you don't reach the people and engage them to come to work for your company, they aren't going to do it. So
Hmm.
this is how you keep them once your net has actually snagged them and brought them in. And I'm going to shut my microphone off.
No, love it. Love it. Thank you. Thank you for all that.
Mm. This is what I've experienced while I was working. It may not be the same for a lot of people, but the experience may be the same. Like sometimes uh, the feedback that they say sometimes, or the reviews that they give, like even if you work on it and then you ask them to like review and give them the feedback that you're not giving the other person enough information, sometimes they don't listen.
Hmm.
Or they think that you're um, kind of like talking back to them, you know.
Hmm.
So a lot of people just do what they're given as work, and don't and they don't want to like put more effort because of all the backlash that they face.
Yeah. No, that's a really great argument. And I was talking with this other team, just to expand on that now. I was talking with this other team last week that was saying how, they have an employee specifically who just blatantly disregarded the review. They just completely disagreed with the review outright. And they were trying to find ways of sort of connecting with that employee and making sure that wasn't the case. And um, people, yeah, as you said, people are sort of they'll have one bad interaction, based on, a bad manager or whatever, or even the employee. And they'll just say, never again. Like this, I'm just not believing in this process. And really, I know I'm sort of, again, going sort of salesy on this, but if it becomes a conversation that happens from the beginning, you've onboarded the employee, and there's an expectation that we're going to be talking all the time about your performance, and
Mhm.
it's all going to be documented, and then a review will eventually happen. It's just such a healthier dynamic to have because they know that you are equally invested in their growth and improvement, as opposed to just, oh, we're going to sit down and now again I have to defend my position as an employee about what I did, and the manager is going to come in here trying to tell me about all the bad things I did. That's just such an unhealthy dynamic that's just not going to help the team in the long run. So it's not, it's a little bit of what you said, but I was just sort of taking it a little bit further. Because yeah, look, we're dealing with people. People are difficult. People are hard. It's not easy. It's impossible for everyone to be happy. So let's try to find ways in which we can work together because we all want to do better. We all want to make more money. We all want to do better. We all want to get more responsibility, and so we should work together on that within the context of our businesses. If someone's not working towards that, then there's something weird going on, or it's just not the right fit.
Yeah, that's correct. Now, anybody has anything to say or contribute, please feel free to. So, sorry about that, guys. I was having some technical issues, but if you guys have anything to present, please feel free to let us know so we can also bring you on as a speaker. And as always, please share back on how this meeting was, whether it was useful, whether you found, and all other things, so we can like have more meetings. So this is what you guys can look forward to for the next upcoming meetings. So we will see you there. Thank you so much, guys.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Neha, again. Appreciate it all the time.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.